get going, I'll take a note of any questions that people raise online. Please do that, and we'll find a point to ask our speakers for questions at some point during the meeting, probably towards the end, because we've got quite a packed agenda this evening. So again, thanks very much for those that are coming along. A quick intro to the group, the BCS, and the groups that are here. So BCS, British Computer Society, if you've not ever heard of us before, you are in our London HQ. So professional society for people that do things in IT. This group's a joint event between the Information Security Specialist Group. So that's the special interest group within the BCS who are interested in all things security. That's one half of the sort of membership here, and then the other half of the interest here is the group that I actually chair is the DevSecOps group. So DevSecOps is, if you like, it's an intersection between application developers and those in security. So what we're trying to do there is we're trying to help people working in security understand the world of applications development and how they can help the developers. And on the other side of it, we're trying to help people working in applications development predominantly to understand what it means to write applications securely and bring those two parties together to work together. The DevOps bit of it is also important because DevSecOps came from the DevOps world, which is all about automation. So we've got all of that as well. So it's very much what's going on in the modern world today, where everything is automated, everything's in code. So that's a quick intro to those two groups. So first of all, we've got Mark here, who I used to work with until a couple of years ago at IBM. Mark will introduce himself very well, I'm sure, in a second. And seated at the front, we've got Connor and Fatini. So we're really lucky tonight to have three speakers. The topic is a really, really important one for both people in the DevSecOps world and across all sectors of security. It's all about making sure things are designed properly in the first place, because if they're not designed properly, then bad things happen. So what we're trying to do tonight is not look at the bad things that might happen, although maybe some stories might come out. It's trying to help people understand what to do to design things right in the first place. So thank you very much, Mark. And I'll leave Mark to introduce himself and make a start. Thank you.
Next slide. So just to go through the agenda. So I'm Mark Buckwell. Recently, as Val said, graduated into the next stage of my life, where I'm doing part-time work and that I love. And part of that is getting a book published, and we're going to think about architectural thinking for security design. We have Tina here from the Cabinet Office, and when I asked to come and speak, I thought it would be nice to actually have a set of speakers that then gave a bit of context between the different areas. So I'm going to talk about how you make architectural decisions when you put together a system. Tina's going to talk about more about the wider project aspect of secure by design and what the government's doing. And then we thought, well, Connor can come along and talk about CISSG, which is,
support is wonderful. So do you want to maybe speak up a bit?
Do I speak? If I speak straight up there, is that better?
Can you give me a thumbs up on the remote people and let me know if you can hear better now?
Yeah. Right. Okay. So speak up there. To the gods. And so I thought, well, let's get somebody, if you were really interested in that area of the profession, then talk about professional registration and recognition of security architecture and security design. So that's what Connor's going to talk about. So we've got a session with myself. But before we do that, I thought what we should do is talk about the definition of what design, architecture, and engineering means, because they're misused and abused. And if you've looked at recent jobs, on several occasions you see head of security architecture, and you read the description, it's head of security engineering. So there is a difference between engineering, architecture, and design. So I wanted to get that right first, so that then the rest of the conversation makes sense. So I'll do that, and then we've got the three speakers. And afterwards, if you bought a copy of the book, I can sign it for you. And if you've forgotten and left it home, I can give you a sticker to put in it. So I didn't know how many would come. So we've got some stickers as well, and some laptop stickers as well, if you want as well. So, so let's talk about design, architecture, if we think about the cycle that we go through when we're putting together a solution, we normally talk about gathering the requirements, and we're using more recently in the past few years, we're using design thinking to gather those requirements and really focus on the end user. And they use other consulting techniques as well to gather those requirements. Then we move on and think about, well, what's the overall architecture of the solution that's going to meet those requirements? And the next stage is the architectural thinking. But often we sort of go straight to the implementation of the system, and we put together an architecture of how we glue the wires together, which is rather than actually thinking about, well, how does that architectural thinking move in a continuum from the business requirements to the IT. And that's the architectural thinking I'm going to talk about. And then we have the engineering stage, which is about the coding and very relevant to the DevSecOps people, because that's the bit that you're actually translating that architecture into real code that you're going to go and that you're actually going to put together the application. And then afterwards that you've got the way how we're going to do the operation. So you've got to think about that, go through that cycle. There is a definition, and there's an interesting definition that came from, I think Ebert Rectin was I think he's the right author of this one, but he was the systems architecture for the US government, the military satellites that went around the world. And if you think about that, that's a system of systems. So a system was a satellite, a system was the ground station, a system was how they process that data, and so on. So he's the booker, he's the author about systems architecting, and his definition was architecture, engineering aims for technical optimization, which is your coding. You're physically implementing that's what your requirements, and architecting is about client satisfaction. How do I the business requirements? So engineering is more of a science. Architecting is art. It's based on heuristics and the way we put together the components. So, and that really gives you a sort of an idea of the difference. And what I want to do with security architecture is bring more of that science in by having a systematic way of thinking about the way that you architect systems. So it's less of an art and more of bringing more of that engineering thought into it, that science. On the other side, if we talk about, well, what is architecture? There's an IBM fellow, Grady Booch, but he's also one of the co-authors of object-oriented methods. And his definition was all architecture is design. So we're talking about design in the bigger context, because design includes some of that requirement stuff and some of that engineering. But not all design is architecture, because architecture represents a set of significant design decisions that shape the form and function of a system, where significant is measured by a cost of change. So if I make a decision to go and change the notice on the security notice on login to a system, it's a design decision. It's not significant because I'm not going to have to go and change the architecture. But if I make a decision to go and move from a monolithic application to a container-based application, that's an architectural decision, because it's going to cost a hell of a lot to go and make that change on the system. And that's the difference between design and architecture. And so when we do systems, we make architectural decisions in terms of the technology we're going to choose and so on as part of that system. So, and then where does Secure by Design fit in? It really originates back from some of the work that is developed from secure engineering stuff. IBM back in the days of MVS, there was a focus on the development of the operating system, security into it. So but really over time that developed into the work that Microsoft did and you will get the slides. So that, and the work that Adam Shostak did with the threat modeling. So, and you can look at Shostak. So, that's something that he's been doing. So that originates from there. Others have developed things, some NIST things, and in the UK, CISA has been doing a focus on secure by design for products, because they're concerned about, if I make a fridge, then and I enable it for the internet, it is secure by design. So that's their focus. And Fatina's going to talk about secure by design from the perspective of the UK government, and they've been doing. But really, in the past, secure by design was very restricted in terms of its scope, was the threat modeling, and that was about all it said. But well, Fatina and team have been doing a lot more on that, and they've extended it much further. And so she wants to go and just have a quick talk about interconnected terms.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So, by way of introduction, I've been a cybersecurity professional for 20 years. I've worked in public sector and private sector as well. I'm not a security architect, but I've worked with many security architects throughout my career. In the Cabinet Office, I lead securing digital transformation, and secure by design is at the core of this. I'll take you through our approach and the work we've done so far as a case study. But before I do so, as Mark said, I'm going to try and confuse us a little bit more with the terms we've got here that obviously they are being used interchangeably. And I don't think yet we are coming between various industries and contexts. Things mean slightly different things. So in government, when we first started, I'll just take you through a story. We started saying, well, we are working on secure by design. And then we started obviously working on principles for secure by design. And the first question we got is, why are you working on principles while we've got the secure design principles from NCSE already published on the NCSE website? So secure by design in government encompasses the end-to-end life cycle of delivery, from when we start thinking about security in business cases up to when the project moves from project, or the service moves from a project to business as usual in operation. So that's what secure by design is about, and I'll take you through our approach. Obviously, secure design focuses more on what Mark mentioned about basically how do we embed security in design. So the architects, technical architects, security architects should be working hand in hand to kind of deliver this part of component. Privacy by design, another term that comes up very often. Obviously, focus here is the privacy of the users, GDPR, Data Protection Act, and how do we make sure that the products or our services are configured in a way that protects the user's privacy, so out of the box. Resilience by design is also caters for availability, so how the systems withstand disruption, so expands to that as well. And again, within the government context, I'm quite interested to hear your thoughts at the end about those terms. Secure by deployment, secure by development, then focus on those very, very critical phases around development and deployment, where DevSecOps work together again to have secure coding practices and CI/CD, all those automated tools to make our life easier, but also in a secure way. I'll hand over back to you, Mark. I'm happy to take your questions at the end.
Okay, thank you. So as you, in summary, I guess what I'm going to talk about is secure architectural thinking. Your design is slots into secure by design. So it's part of that. And it's not, we need both. And what I'm going to talk about is one way of doing it. And I know BT did I don't know if the guys from BT are here, but they did a very good session a month or two ago. And so that's another way of doing it, and they have their own practices, which are very good as well. So, and I always think that really what we have is a sort of a kit bag of different tools and techniques, and really you're not expected to go and use it on everything, but adapt it to your own environments and your own practices. What will the way you work. So I'm going to talk about architectural thinking for secure design, and really it started out actually a long time ago. 25 years ago, when I was after e-business, the days of e-business, and we had all these new systems being suddenly all these companies deciding they wanted to go and put stuff on the internet. And how did we put together a standard way of introducing architecture? But we didn't have any architects. So how do we train people to go and think the right way when they go and actually work in projects? So the idea was to transform IT specialists as part of the organization and train them in both the technology, but the way of thinking about how to put systems together. And then about 6 years ago, it sort of resurrected itself when somebody said, well, we need a degree module that actually teaches practical industry, practices, so that our graduates, when they come out of the University of Warwick, that they have some skills that they can work in industry and ask the right questions, not just a bunch of technology and so on. They want some practical skills. So that's where this comes from. And so somebody said to me, well, about it must have been 18 months ago, well, it's all well good that you're doing all these courses, but we can't read it. And so at that point, we decided we'd actually write this into a book. And so that's what I'm going to talk through, the work that we've been doing over the past 6 years, and we put it in the book. Architectural thinking needs, one of the things that it needs is a common language. So if you look at designs, you'll find that they all have different diagrams, they all have different approaches, tables, whatever and they write it all in different ways. So if we're going to be successful in terms of communicating security, we need a standard way. So we need a standard set of practices to go through that architectural thinking, so that we go from the business requirements through to the implementation and operation. And that, when I started out, my idea of security was we write our own security architecture. That's not the way to do it. It should be integrated in within the system design practices in the organization. Security architecture is only there for the specific security applications. And I think of a security application, identity and access management, and so on. It's an application. It's just an application. It's that has a special set of business requirements. And we need it to scale. Now, we started out, when I started out 30 more years ago, we thought of systems as a single system, and we do a bit of programming, and we make somebody log in and enter a password, and that was all great. But now we deal with hybrid cloud architectures that need to integrate together, and so we need a way of bringing that together, so that we're systematic in our approach to the design, security design, and we end up with lots and lots of terminology. And so over the years, we've sort of the ideas for architecture we brought together into 4 key concepts. We started out with a focus back on data-centric security, because often you'll start in a project and the first thing they say, well, we need to put in a firewall. Yeah, okay, hold on. What are we protecting? What's the data we're trying to think about it? And what's the sensitivity of it? And where does it flow? Where does it get stored? And so on. So it's trying to go and focus back on that. Second thing is secure by design has been around for a while, and the use of threat modeling. So we need to make sure that's part of our thinking process. And the third thing is, of course, the other buzzword is zero trust, which every software vendor says it's a zero trust networking architecture. Networking is only part of it. So think about the underlying concept of what zero trust is and embed that into your thinking. And finally, we have compliance, which has to support all of this to demonstrate that what we have implemented, the controls are in place. If you do your architecture right, your architecture automatically demonstrates your compliance. So putting compliance as the heart of your architecture thinking also supports your ongoing system. So we put those three together. The book is called Security Architecture for Hybrid Cloud. It's called that because it's good for the search engine optimization. What it should be called is Architectural Thinking for Secure Design, because that's what it's about. So, because it's about the way in which we think to achieve a secure design. So, and that's why, that's why I put both on here. So we think about process. First of all, we have to think about process. We have to go through steps, the normal plan, design, build, run, so on. There's a set of activities overall that need to be complete. And so we've put that together and documented those activities and the artifacts that come out of those activities. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. To support that, we have reference architecture, because the other challenging thing with industry is you will find lots of reference architectures, but they're all biased towards the manufacturer that's produced them to go and sell the product. And so what we did was we put together an architecture, a sort of enterprise security architecture that merged all of those different architectures that we could find in the industry and come up with a common way, a set of domains and a set of grouping, so that it made it easier as to communicate the sorts of security controls. And what we tried to do is to make sure that method, because it has a standard steps, it overlays whatever system design methodology you got already, your project management methodology. We didn't want to go and divert from that. And it would work with either a waterfall or an agile environment, so that thinking as well. We're not saying that you have to write a document that's 100 pages in length. The core of it is an artifact dependency diagram. So it's a set of artifacts that are that you produce, that you may not produce all of them, but they're tables or diagrams. They're not a document that you go as you go through the phases of the architectural thinking. But as I come back to the definition we had at the beginning, architecture is about making architectural decisions. So the core of that is the architectural decision record, which goes throughout. So, and if you're an architect, that's one of the most core pieces of communication you have to gain agreement within an organization, particularly when people don't agree. We do it in the 3 phases, so you're not going to read all of that slide. So the enterprise context is you've got to go and gather stuff, and you've got to go and gather information, and we'll talk a little bit more about that from the external context of the organization and the internal. And what we try to do is to give you almost a checklist of the things you need to think about, and it's not just thinking about all the policies over there. There is a whole list of things you need to think about, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Then you've got to think about the requirements phase. And requirements is not about necessarily about security requirements. It's how about to extract the security requirements from the business requirements. And that's why you have to integrate and use the same techniques, the design thinking, agile, user stories, and so on that everybody else uses, because you need to be part of that development life cycle. Be back at the beginning, because when you look at an application, you'll find that the requirements really come back at the beginning when you start the design thinking, when you're sitting down with the client and trying to go through the business requirements. Then the architecture. So how do you decompose in a standard way the architecture from, and we'll talk about the 3 layers that we use for that, through to operations that people forget about. Okay, they've delivered the system and they've forgotten that actually they need to implement the processes that need to run the system, to run the security services. So we emphasize that as well, and the assurance at the end. The way we do it, how do people learn this? They use a case study. In this case, in the book, it's a case study about entering Guildford and paying charges for, like London. terms of the charges to enter Guildford. And so we take them through the different aspects of, okay, somebody gives you a random architecture and picture, how do you move from that through that architectural thinking process? So that's the core component suite. So we talk about the overall flow in terms of the project. We talk about the artifacts you're going to produce and the techniques associated with them. And we're talking about using a use case to go and to learn how to do it. Now, I haven't got time to go through all the phases, so I've selected things to go and talk about today. We're going to talk about establishing the context and two parts of that. But if you look in there, I've made it bigger, so perhaps you read it or on the back. But it just gives you an idea of the things you need to think about. And it's not just thinking about laws and regulations, but perhaps thinking about the consumer expectations. And I sort of raised the idea that, that's and also I suppose the business expectations that you have to be a trusted organization, and therefore that there is an expectation from the consumers of your applications, and all the other external things, the industry context and so on. And internally, there's a whole raft of stuff you need to think about internally as part of building an application. Now, I'm thinking about from the perspective of a business application, but that business application could be an identity and access management application. It's just an application with the specialist aspects to it. So those are things you need to think about. And I'm going to talk about enterprise. I'm going to talk about enterprise architecture and enterprise processes and how we talk about that part of the method. As I said, we produce an enterprise architecture. We took lots of different architectures, combined them, and find a way of explaining all the different things almost as a heat map, so that and you should find that most things fit within that, and I'm sure other organizations have similar things. But we got the domains at the top: identity and access, network, application, data, endpoint, and detect and respond. So when you think about when you're accessing an application, you're probably going from left to right as well. So we've ordered it that way. And then within those, we've got the other collections of controls. We just split them into 5 for each of those to make it easy, because it makes a nice heat map. And that helps you communicate things, because that's always challenging in an organization when they see a familiar architecture. In fact, in IBM, we actually had 4 versions of this at one point from 4 different divisions. And I banged heads together and said, we can't keep doing this. And so we came up with a sort of an earlier generation of this, so that we came up with one. We agreed across cloud and consulting and software and so on. So that's we came with that. And then on the left-hand side, we got to think about the GRC type stuff. And on the right-hand side, even if you're building a security application, you still need to go and think about instant problem change. You still need to think about asset and configuration management about your application. And many times I've seen a security department that decided they were beyond asking for change requests because they were security department, and it was security. People didn't need to know that they were collecting data across all the systems. They ran a script and took out all the systems. So they then ended up coming back to going through the standard change process. So a security, we're not beyond those processes as well. So we use those as checklists to go and bring people back to reality. We've seen it, it's sort of heat map in terms of status. We've seen it, people overlay in terms of regulations, where the specific areas are, and so on. So you can make use of that. So that's one tool we've provided, and you're welcome to go and change it. The other tool we provided is to think about the traceability of the responsibilities and the processes we build into the applications. So on the left-hand side, we build up our reference architecture, and we've listed joiners, movers, mover levers, JML process that many have probably got, but there will be a RACI associated with that. There will be processes. And ideally, if you're at a large organization, you'll have a standard single process for the whole organization. Well, we have this in IBM. And that process has all the control points you need You don't care how people implement it, as long as they follow that process. They have the control points, they record the audit events, and then it's up to the procedures and work instructions to be implemented within the lines of business or technology. So we build up this layer. The smaller organizations, obviously, you're not going to build these layers, but those are the things you need to think about. And so we help you do this as part of and that thinking with some different artifacts that you can use to go and show how that traceability happens right from the beginning through to the end. So those are the two things that sort of come from the enterprise context. And ideally, your organization has a standard set of processes for the whole organization with the same set of control points. And therefore, you're only auditing them once, because you'll be against the same process. But I see people reinventing the wheel for each procedure. And then that's how audits fail. So we give you that. And then I'm just going to talk about, I'm not going to talk about requirements, haven't got time to do that today. What I'm going to do is talk about the architecture side, that's the middle bit. And I'm going to talk about the principles behind that. So, as I said, everything in security should be about the data. And it's really about the transaction flow. So it's trying to reinforce into the architects. So the architects that do this aren't necessarily security architects. They are the application infrastructure architects. We need to get that into their brains that they need to think this way. And so they think by a shopper initiates a transaction and want to buy something. And they've got to go through some application to put it into the cart. They then have to pay for it. And the flows out to an external system again. They then need to sort out the delivery, and then it returns the information back to them. It's a very simple scenario. And there are threats to those data flows, whether they are in transit, they're stored, or they're being processed. So you get your architects to think about that very simple concept. They're in a good starting point to go and think about, not about the technology, but the protection of the data transit. We then think about it in three layers. At the top layer, the system context, and the system context been around since I worked up 1963 by the systems engineering. It's in the systems engineering body of knowledge, and the systems and the system context diagram is a very simple diagram that says this is the boundary of the system, and these are the interactions from the actors, both human and system. And how often do you get to a project and you ask the people, well, what's the scope of your project? They haven't drawn that boundary. And that's one thing we reinforce with the architects to say, understand the boundary of your system, because what goes in that is the data that you're protecting. You're in charge of protecting that data. Outside, you're either two things. Either it's a system probably somewhere else in your organization that has policies applied to it, or if it's external, you're going to have to write a contract. You're going to have some sort of external agreement, and even internally, you might have an internal agreement for controls that are put into place. So that's why the system context is important, because that defines your agreements that you're going to have to go and make and those interfaces. And you define the actors, system and human. And some of those are the primary actors, like somebody who's going to deal with the store. And some of those are sort of supporting actors, like the person who's doing the compliance. What needs have they got with your system, and so on. So you build that up. Once you've got the external part of the system, then you start about the internal, which is thinking about the functional components of the system and how they interact. And that's ignoring the technology again. I'll show you a picture of that. And then you deploy those functional components onto real systems. So how do you describe those real systems? Often we go to the implementation without actually understanding what's the boundary of our system or what's interacting. And we've forgotten to go and add the integration with all the systems management stuff that need to go in there. And we haven't thought about principally how are the application developers going to secure their application at application level, not at an infrastructure level. So if you think about it in those three layers, you've got the process you go through. And so first thing was the system context diagram. That's just an example. It's one we printed for the book, based on the case study. And so it's, you know, thinking about those actors, the dark ones with people are the human actors, and the ones with the buildings are the system actors. And system actors, you're likely want to have you'll want a security interface with all of those flows, and those are the basis for how you're going to think about the flows through the system. You then think about the components of the system. I probably should have done a build up on this one, but all the things that are in black is the system that behind, and it's a 3-tier architecture: user interface, application, database, with some other integration here. So and with some components within that. And so we then do the threat modeling on top of those components, and we teach the basics of threat modeling with the expectations that you'll go away and actually, you know, do the other courses available, that, you know, you might select something different in terms of techniques that are available in the industry, and that will move on. But the idea is that you understand that you're going to start your threat modeling with your application, and you're going to go deal with it for the infrastructure. Then we got an application. Okay, we got functionality of it. On one application I was dealing with last year, the data warehouse was on bare metal because it would only run on bare metal for performance. The hard payment stuff was running on VMware because it would only run on VMware. The cloud native stuff was running on cloud native stuff. And I think we had, and then it was split between container-based application and running on servers and appliances. So you end up with applications with all sorts of different architectures. So one implication obviously is the integration of that, but from a security architect perspective, each of those environments could be on premises, they could be in cloud, in multiple clouds, they could be different ways of doing it, they could be run by different organizations as well. So they were ISVs, they were index running bits of this bigger application were coming in to manage it. So what we do is to try and think about the different platforms as part of that architecture, and looking at those different platforms that you're running the bits of the application on, they each have different security policies that could apply to it. So although, you know, you've got your organization policy, you get an outsourcer, they'll be required also to implement their outsourcer's policy as well, which is a combined policy. And then you end up with complexity of all these different bits of security running throughout the application. So we're trying to go and get people to go and think about what's on the platform, what are the policies that apply, and what are the implications on the architecture that you have come from that. Then you need to translate. So you're taking your component architecture diagram, which is your functional components of your application, and you need to decide where to place those things. And this sort of diagrams gives you the idea of the different platforms, but how do you describe that? And then we get the traditional, some sort of cloud architecture diagram from the favorite cloud provider, which is all different and means different things. So ideally, you know, you want some sort of common language. So we've tried to go and put some sort of common language in what we do. I'm not saying that you adopt what we've been doing, but this doesn't even follow IBM Cloud. But it is a standard way that you can write in a document. And so you're thinking about down the bottom, you've got, in this case, Clean Air at Guildford is sitting on a cloud instance. At the top left, you've got the actors connecting from the internet, and the top right, you've got actors connecting from the point of presence. So therefore, you're thinking about this overall architecture. What it really looks like is something like this, which you can't read. But at the top, you've got your actors. Where do we use the actors? We use the actors back at the system context diagram. So we've already agreed all the interfaces. So the actors at the top should be the same as the one that you've put together at the beginning for your system context. And generally what you find is that actually you've forgotten something, and then you're going to have to go back and change something. And then what comes below is your system. So it should map back to the system context. And what's in your system should be the functionality you've described in your architecture diagram. In this case, we forgot about a connection. I forgot that we're going to have to employ somebody to go and do the vulnerability scanning, and we added a change request onto that. So, and that's how we go through the process. So that was a very, very quick run through about the process and the principles behind what we're trying to do. So potential next steps, perhaps this will help you look at your architectural thinking process for secure design. Consider how can you change more from being an art and people having their own, being their own artist and, you know, creating things in their own way. How can I bring some more engineering into architecture? And then by improving that quality of secure design, hopefully you'll iterate because you'll have patterns. You'll have standard patterns that you create, and therefore people will design it in the same way each time, and the controls will improve over time rather than redoing the work each time differently. That should reduce the cost because you're not repeating it, and your project should speed up. And hopefully then you'll also make sure that the security, the operational processes are included from the beginning of the project rather than the end, because you've built it into your patterns. So I hope that that's useful. Those people, you know, we're also interested in any ideas. If you think we've missed something, please, interested in knowing. I have 7 free books. For those people that haven't bought a book, I will sign for first people in the queue. And if you brought your book, I know, or if you've forgotten it, I've got a label you can stick in your book. So you can get a signed book today. So
I know you're about to go on to the next bit.
you got a question?
Yeah, so we have maybe five minutes
Yeah.
if people have questions for Mark before we go on to Fatini and Connor.
Yep.
So I did see a hand wavering at the back there from David. So questions in the room, and I have one question online. So David, do you want to?
So I've got to say, Mark, many thanks. I've enjoyed your book. I've forgotten it, so I'll take the label. You mentioned life cycle management.
Yeah.
I've been in this room where David Cuthbertson, who's the chair of TR60B, which is more the Kim side of life cycle management, but specifically he was invited to be involved as the only European on the ANSI life cycle management. And to give you a comparison, he baselines for a living entire multiple data center implementations after up to 3,000 locations.
Yeah.
So my suggestion might be a whole section on TR60, and then perhaps I feel that would beef out what you mentioned in passing, which for me is a criticality. So David Cuthbertson has the TR60 group on LinkedIn. He's a well-known speaker here, and his group basically brought ITIL into the BCS. So I hope that adds a little value for you.
Yeah, thank you. So if you just message me on LinkedIn, then I'll remember. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so to be fair to the people online, I've got a question here from someone online. So do you want to just come and are you able to read this? So it says when you say significant cost to change, do you mean just from a technical level or at a project level? E.g., if a change requires a small tweak to a config file but needs significant regulatory policy work to allow it to happen. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think significant change has to be from the overall project, not just the individual architecture.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Second point wasn't a question. It was just saying it all makes good sense, which is really good to hear. Some nice positive feedback. And wait just a minute. Someone's written some extra things in here, so I've lost it. There's another question that just popped up. Okay, so informative presentation. Does the book cover trade-offs between business requirements and overriding security concerns? This is a common challenge in the modern workplace.
It talks about, I suppose, what is the standard project management triangle of cost, functionality, risk, and then of course you've got the balances between the business and the technical. And I have this frustrating, I have these frustrating conversations sometimes where I've had the security team insist on doing something which would have a bigger impact elsewhere, which actually have a bigger impact, say, on the business resilience. And therefore, I'll give you an example. If you're in cloud and you decide that you want the HSM to be on premise, you've now got a difference in resilience, because you've now got this connectivity that changes the resilience of your architecture, because now you've got to make sure that connectivity is there at all times. You need to build a much more high resilience key management system. And actually, that business risk may be greater than the value derived from having an on-premise HSM versus one that is in a cloud data center. And that's a decision that has to be made by the business, not necessarily not even by security people. It's not, it's a team-based decision. And so there isn't one right answer, but
So that's great. And that's a really good example. So what's the security architect's role?
the role, I think, is to have that conversation. And that's where architectural decisions come into it. You write down the different options, you compare the different pros and cons, and as a part of the overall governance, the architecture governance, the business may be involved in the enterprise architecture team, and then together through the board, through the governance, you'd go and make that decision. It's not necessarily one person's decision to make that.
Okay. So it's to help facilitate the decision making.
It helps in decision making, and I see us as a, to get to the SMEs that will provide the right inputs to make sure they do consider all the options.
Okay. Anyone else in the room? Yeah, thank you.
I've got a comment. I suppose it seconds that gentleman's mention about life cycle, because for me, I find that that is possibly a gap in terms of what I see around architecture, because it's secure by design, but for how long? So many of our products have lifespans. We seem to kind of forget about that. It's almost like you should perhaps have that conversation with the business up front. It's like, how long do you expect this system to actually be in operation before you have to reinvest to refresh it or to update it?
And that's part of the business context. We should be thinking about that and asking those questions. And that's why security architects shouldn't be the last people to be brought onto the project. They should be having those conversations at the formation of the project and asking those sorts of questions, because there is a cost of maintaining all that security. And often that's why what happens if you leave security to the end, you haven't considered part of the life cycle cost. Whereas if you build it in the beginning, you can say, well, actually, I need 6 people to run the key management for my HSMs. So that's into the cost of the ongoing cost. Versus if I run it as part of a service, I use a different mechanisms. That's one of the balances you've got.
Okay. As you mentioned, security by design, I think we should move on.
I think that's a good
talk. So thank you very much, Mark, for building those questions ad hoc. And should we go on to Fatini now?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Just to connect Mark's sessions and my session, a lot of Mark's content is at the core of the security by design approach, especially for the security architects and DevSecOps. In terms of my session, I will take you through the strategic context, so where security by design came from in government. I'll take you through the approach, so the various components of the approach and who was involved in the development, our progress in terms of challenges and immediate goals, and how we work with the industry so far. And we'll close with questions and answers. So, security by design is not a new concept. I think we've established that. It has been cemented as a necessity in the government cybersecurity strategy and also in the digital strategy. It's also a core part of the government cybersecurity standard, and all of that together aims to improve the government's cyber resilience. The Deputy Prime Minister announced the launch of the Secure by Design approach in December 2023, so 9 months ago. as a call to action. So encouraging everyone to implement the approach so that digital by default and secure by design go hand in hand. So secure by design aims to improve the government's cyber resilience and data sharing by establishing a common risk-driven approach for integrating protective controls into digital services from the outset and throughout their delivery. It also aims to embed effective cybersecurity practices throughout digital delivery by enforcing mandatory principles and proposing best practice activities covering every stage of the digital life cycle, from when security is considered as part of business cases, as I said before, up to when the service moves from project to business as usual. Finally, aims to cultivate a shared responsibility for security by fostering a culture where security is a collective responsibility and ensuring that digital teams actively manage security risks at the appropriate level throughout the digital delivery. Coming on to the benefits, we went through extensive discovery and analysis work with input from a cross-government working group and an industry panel that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the purpose was to understand the problem space, put that in the context of government. So the approach aims to bring a number of significant benefits, including improved collaboration between digital and security colleagues and a positive security culture. The approach itself provides a RACI matrix for various roles in digital teams, which suggests who should be involved in the various secure by design activities. So clarifying and raising awareness of responsibilities will help colleagues cultivate a stronger security mindset and encourage active participation in building a positive culture, security culture. Another benefit about promoting a consistent and risk-driven approach, identifying appropriate and proportionate security measures. So security is not a tick in the box. The approach provides a solid foundation with the principles we'll look at in a minute, but also allows for adaptability with the recommended best practice of activities. So the activities are advisory, and organizations can tailor those based on their specifics. It also contributes to the upskilling of non-security professionals because the activities provide practical guidance, how to do things, steps in this guidance, and they're also supported by templates, tools, and examples. And finally, it promotes continuous security. So the approach is not an assurance process, but aims to help organizations build security capabilities to achieve their respective CAF profiles as part of GovAssure. So CAF is the cyber assessment framework on the guidance from NCSE, and GovAssure, which is the latest government cybersecurity assurance framework, is using CAF as its standard. So moving on to who has been part of this. The approach was developed with input from cyber and digital experts collaborating with us as part of this cross-government working group. And of course, in the Cabinet Office, Government Security Group, and obviously NCSE have been a critical friend all along, ensuring alignment with other cross-government cybersecurity initiatives as part of the strategy. Obviously, recognizing the role of the vendors and suppliers, we established an industry panel with some of the biggest suppliers to government. And we've been working with them, asking for their insights, feedback on the work, on the guidance and everything. So moving on to the approach, the components of the approach. So this is the first iteration of the approach, and which focuses on building strong foundation and clear direction for our departments, for the government organizations, and comprises of the policy, the principles, 10 principles, 21 activities, and resources supporting the activities. The policy and the principles are mandatory, while activities and resources are advisory, best practice. Coming on to the policy. So the policy states that all central government departments and ALBs shall incorporate effective security practices based on common principles when delivering and building digital services and technical infrastructure. The shall means mandatory. The government organizations must adhere to that policy. It applies to new services and also significant changes to services that fall into scope of the government spend controls process. So that process is a mechanism designed to ensure that public money is spent efficiently and effectively across government departments. It involves a system of checks and approvals for projects to make sure that they align with strategic priorities in the digital strategy and also in the cybersecurity strategy, and Secure by Design is one of those commitments, strategic commitments. Cabinet Office will check adherence to the Secure by Design principles throughout the digital and technology spend controls process, which is a process now available, has been published on gov.uk. So that means that digital projects seeking additional funding from Treasury must demonstrate how they adhere to the Secure by Design principles as part of their delivery. Moving on to the principles, these are the government Secure by Design principles, so within the government context, and reflect security challenges in digital delivery faced by government organizations, and they are designed to drive outcomes. So these include appointing a business risk owner for every digital service throughout its life, designing flexible and defense-in-depth architectures, ensuring that controls are user-centric, very important, and proportionate to the risks. And I've put in pink squares the principles that I think are closer to the architects and DevSecOps hearts, principles. I should not miss to say that the NCSC secure design principles, those 5 principles that are on the NCSC website, have been incorporated as part of this work. We work with NCSC to make sure that they have been reflected, especially around principles 4 to 8 here. So these are the 21 activities. The activities are not sequential, but there is a theme, there is a flow, starting from the top right corner about preparing a secure service, then moving to understand the security landscape, then manage your security risks, and then anticipate and respond to vulnerabilities. When I say then, those two go really hand in hand. And finally, maintaining continuous assurance. So the principles have been expanded to those activities to help organizations implement the principles. Each activity, which is published on security.gov.uk, provides the what, why, when, and how to do things. And these are enriched with templates and examples. Every little green square on this slide indicates that there are resources behind those activities. And just to bring together the principles and activities, organizations who already have their own local copy of a Secure by Design approach, they are expected to fully adhere to the 10 Secure by Design principles from the government. It's also reasonable that organizations may develop additional principles or activities to cater for their specifics. It's also expected that organizations may tailor how they carry out those activities. So the activities are best practice advisory based on their own security risk management and assurance framework. So resources, the little green rectangle boxes on the previous slide. Because these resources here, the first 3 are aimed at the organizations as they are adopting the Secure by Design approach, while the last 3 are aimed at projects and delivery teams as they are following the approach. The guide to adopting secure by design, the second one, describes indicative activities during the adoption to help organizations with implementing the secure by design policy. The preparation checklist is designed to help organizations identify potential gaps in their current digital delivery and security practices, and then list areas for improvement as part of their improvement plan. I've also offered a communications toolkit to help organizations raise awareness and also secure buy-in and sponsorship from the senior colleagues. This toolkit includes a fact sheet, show and tell slides, bite-sized videos, and Q&A, so a document with questions and answers. All of that is available on security.gov.uk under the guidance for Secure by Design. Moving on to resources that are aimed at project teams as they're implementing the Secure by Design approach. First, we've got a tracker, which is part of a Secure by Design activity called Tracking Secure by Design Progress. And it is mandated for use as part of the digital and technology spend controls assurance process I mentioned before. It includes a set of questions relevant to its specific delivery phase and aims to gather information on how the project is following the Secure by Design principles to deliver appropriate security protections for the digital service. So it allows the project team to provide yes and no answers and support this with comments and evidence. And the output of this tracker is the Secure by Design confidence profile, which is an index ranging from low, medium, and high, and indicates how well the project has adherence to the Secure by Design principle. It is proposed that the delivery managers are responsible for the ongoing maintenance and completion of the tracker with support from the delivery team. So technical architects, the security architects, anyone who is part of the delivery team. And this is as part of the delivery activities and agile ceremonies, not point in time kind of activity. We have developed the RACI matrix. I mentioned that before. Which is really shows how various roles in the delivery team, like project managers, digital and security roles, should be involved in the very Secure by Design activities to help with resourcing and putting teams together. And finally, the security controls taxonomy is to help project teams select appropriate security controls from recognized industry standards as part of ongoing risk mitigation. So as part of the activities that were at the very top of the previous slides that had the activities on. So it's not a tick box exercise. The use of the taxonomy is recommended as part of an activity called responding to and mitigating security risks. And the controls in the taxonomy have been mapped to the cyber assessment framework outcomes in order to support organizations and delivery teams demonstrate how they're achieving tough outcomes. As part of the taxonomy at the moment, we have included controls from NIST SP 853, NCC steps to cybersecurity, the NCC 14 cloud security principles, CIS top 18 critical security controls. Moving on now to people, roles and responsibilities, very important. There has been significant engagement with senior leaders like CDIO, CTOs, CISOs during the development of the approach. And I believe we can all agree that for Secure by Design to succeed, we need strong leadership. So strong leadership is essential. Setting the tone from the top is essential. And CDIOs, CTOs, and CISOs working together is essential. So this slide shows their indicative responsibilities as we have agreed this with them. So we work very collaboratively with this community. Starting with the shared responsibilities, we believe they play a vital role in championing and advocating the benefits of Secure by Design. This is essential for setting a clear strategic direction and updating policies and governance frameworks. It's crucial that this leadership establish secure by design as a shared responsibility across all functions and not just security. And then if we take a look at the individual responsibilities for the specific roles, CDIOs are ultimately accountable for the adoption of secure by design within the organization. They're well positioned to be accountable for this because they direct and oversee the digital strategy and transformation as part of their current role. CTOs, Chief Technology Officers, are responsible for ensuring that secure by design is integrated into the organization's digital delivery processes. They oversee technical architecture and ensure that services are being built with security in mind, adhering to the secure by design principles. Chief Information Security Officers lead the cybersecurity team, who will be actively engaged with the secure by design process, and they need to ensure that cyber security experts are proactively supporting the digital teams, and they are well equipped to contribute to the project success. Finally, the senior responsible owner in government or service owners in agile kind of delivery are accountable for ensuring that secure by design principles are properly implemented in their respective projects. So who secure by design affects? I'm not going to stay very long on this slide. I think it has become very clear that all of these communities, digital and data, project delivery, security, and commercial. So coming on to the roles of the security architect and DevSecOps, you are at the heart of secure by design, development, and deployment. You are at the forefront of ensuring that security is seamlessly embedded into every stage of our delivery, digital delivery. And your expertise and collaboration are essential to delivering secure and resilient digital services. So we see security architects kind of keen to develop and maintain security architecture frameworks that are aligned with the secure by design principles, implement threat modeling that Mark mentioned on his presentation, and prioritize security concerns during the design phase, conduct risk assessments to identify potential vulnerabilities and threats to systems, work closely with development, operations, and DevSecOps teams to foster collaboration and share understanding of security objectives. So about the security culture. So DevSecOps should embed security practices within the development process, implement automated security testing tools and processes to continuously identify vulnerabilities and security issues during development, establish mechanisms for continuous monitoring of security posture in applications and infrastructure, and work closely with the architects. So it's a very kind of close relationship between architects and DevSecOps. I've got a slide on the secure by design champions. So CDIOs are ultimately accountable for the adoption of secure by design in the organization, but it's very unlikely that they will be able to drive the day-to-day implementation. So this responsibility primarily rests with the secure by design champions, who will be collaborating closely with a cross-functional working group and other stakeholders, including the centers of the Cabinet Office, to identify areas for improvement, gather feedback, and implement the necessary changes to enhance security practices across all teams. And with that, we'll move on to implementation. A couple of slides on this. The secure by design rollout approach was finalized with input from the senior leaders we mentioned before, CDIOs, CTOs, and CISOs. There are two tranches. The first tranche is group one, that includes ministerial departments, ALBs, managing critical national infrastructure. And the second tranche, group 2, is everyone else. For group 1 organizations, Secure by Design will be effective in the first quarter of 2025. By effective, I mean that, this strategic commitment and the spend controls approval process will kick in for them. And for group 2 organizations, Secure by Design will be effective in January 2026. So we consulted widely with departments and ALBs about what an effective implementation approach might look like. And the recommended approach stretches across these 3 phases: preparation, transition, and operation. Preparation is about planning and doing. Transition is about piloting, checking, and improving. And operation is about business as usual. So run, and of course, continuous improvement. So, in our kind of language information security, where we've got this plan, do, check, and improve or iterate cycle. So this is what this is about. So I'm not going to go through that in detail, just to show you some indicative implementation tasks we have discussed with the group 1 organizations. We tried not to be overly prescriptive, but for preparation, indicative tasks are about building understanding of the approach. So that's why we've got the communications toolkit and various videos that we share with them. Confirming accountability is very important. Setting the tone from the top, CDIOs accepting the accountability for Secure by Design, getting the champion in place, group, and plan to do the required improvements. For transition, is about check and improve activities with organizations piloting the approach within their environments. And my team, the CDO, piloting the Secure by Design strategic commitment and running the self-assessment tracker with them. And finally, for operation, Secure by Design now is live, rolled out to all in-scope projects. And as part of this, Cabinet Office will be checking adherence to the Secure by Design principles and policy. Working with the suppliers, we are working with the Cabinet Office commercial team and the industry panel I mentioned before on incorporating the Secure by Design requirements into the security schedules and contractual agreements, which are part of commercial contracts. We are looking at including proportionate and effective requirements in contracts and invite the suppliers to demonstrate their own Secure by Design maturity by implementing the principles as part of digital delivery. So this work will be published on the Cabinet Office website, gov.uk is planned for the end of September. So look out for this. We have also started engaging with the Crown Commercial Services to understand what other levers may be available to drive supplier adoption of the Secure by Design approach. This is very much work in progress, and obviously I'm very keen to hear your thoughts about all that. When it comes to suppliers, obviously our message is stay connected. So we've got the link to the approach, familiarize yourselves with the approach, and send us your comments. We've got a mailbox that we accept feedback and comments. Register, sign up for the newsletter. We send a newsletter every month with the news and how things are going. And we've got various briefing events and some Eventbrite webinars coming up in November, the blog. So just to wrap up, I would like to close by highlighting that security is not an optional extra. I think we are all clear on this. It's essential. Just as we wouldn't build a car without brakes or seatbelts, we shouldn't build services without security. Yes, it's complex. It's not going to be perfect from day one. It's going to be a continuous journey, but it's a necessary one, and it's already underway, which is great news. So thank you for listening. Happy to take your questions.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much for Tina. We do have time now, if you're happy to
Absolutely.
take a few questions, if anyone wants to do that from the room. So you said it already.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ended on a very key point about the importance of security, and you also mentioned a RACI matrix. And Mark, you mentioned a whole section in your book around requirements that we didn't have a chance to go into. Do you have any quick thoughts on how to perform effective security requirement solicitation? Because I've been on so many projects. I'm a technology consultant. I've worked with various different clients in financial services and energy and resources sectors, and you'll get a stack of functional requirements, and then 6 months down the line, someone will go, "Oh shit, we forgot to write any non-functionals." And if you're lucky, you've got a bit of a security architect's time, or if you're unlucky, you've not got anyone with security in their job title, and they're often an afterthought. So yeah, just any immediate thoughts on particular roles, how to get effective sponsorship, how to elicit security requirements from non-security resources, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we've got two modes of operation, if you like. So you mentioned more the waterfall that refers to non-functional requirements. In government, we're trying to get away from that. I'll be very open. So we try to encourage everyone to follow an agile approach, which allows these iterations. So go back, and we've got a disciplinary team with the technical architect, the security architect, DevSecOps. You can have ongoing conversations as part of the sprints. Okay, what are we looking at in terms of functionality? We capture the requirements, all sorts of requirements, and security is built in that. So that's the ideal way of working. If we go back to, I completely understand what you're saying, because I've been on that ship with non-functional requirements up front, draw a line, move on to design development, and if we need a change, it needs to be a CR. Get back to that. Difficult. I have to be honest.
That's okay. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Yeah, that's a good answer. So it's hard, but there is an approach that you have in mind. Great. Okay. So you had a question.
I've got a couple of questions actually, if that's possible. Firstly, from what I've seen of Secure by Design is actually really good, and I think it highlights cross-government collaboration. It, really works. But I find it frustrating because I'm effectively a supplier side. When I reached out to access these Security Gov UK, the response was I couldn't have access because I'm not a civil servant. So it seems like a bit of a closed system to me. So that I found that frustrating, because as a supplier, then how will we be able to meet your requirements?
When everything is open, you shouldn't be having this problem. I can find you. I can probably give access to everything, because really, open to everyone.
And secondly, do you see the Secure by Design, sort of what you're doing, representing here, being harmonised with what the MOD have done previously with Secure by Design?
We've worked very closely with MOD, and actually that question has come up many times. So yes, MOD started off their journey on Secure by Design a bit earlier than the cross-government approach. They've got their principles. Their principles, if you like, is an evolution of the 10 cross-government Secure by Design principles, because in all honesty, they have applied that on their PMO process and how they deliver their programs, sorry. So behind the scenes, we've done a mapping of the principles. They are aligned and good.
Okay, so it's an evolution. Okay, so yeah.
Hi, so you said early on in your presentation that the Secure by Design principles wouldn't apply to existing systems or routine maintenance. And I know from bitter experience how many development teams push back and say, all we're doing here is routine maintenance, But not only that, you get a lot of systems where people are, it's very rare people are building greenfield systems these days. They're usually building on top of something they've got and adding something on and extending it. So how do you come up with a coherent set of guidelines as to when it should apply?
Sure. So I probably didn't make myself very clear there. So Secure by Design applies to everything. But government, like the center, cabinet office, will take adherence to the secure by design policy and principles through specific way, which is the spend controls approval process. And just to manage the workload, in all honesty, we have to prioritize the high risk, very important services that digital services that are in flight in projects. And as you can imagine, we've got 33 group 1 organizations, 66 ALB, so we needed to follow that approach. We're not saying to government departments, don't apply security by design to your whole estate. We're saying they do, but the center will check adherence through that process.
Okay, so you've got, I mean, I can see a lot of issues there, which I'm sure I don't need to spell out to you about how a lot of your security vulnerabilities are going to be in your existing systems.
Oh, well, let me just come in with this one then, understand your question a bit better. You know, GovAssure, which is the government cyber security assurance framework. So the services that are live, like business as usual, evergreen and that, GovAssure is looking at that.
All right, so you've got another body to do that work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I thought the question, yes. So
Yeah.
I'll hopefully answer the question now better.
No, actually, you answered several questions in one go, so it's fine.
Great value for money.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, is there one more in the room? Yes, over here.
Is the security compromised by a power cut
No.
during a power cut?
Security, well, security, cyber security, technical security, I mean, there are many.
It's all security.
Well, it's a thing, it's yes, it's like a disruption, is it not?
Do you want to
lose-
say what's behind your question,
Yes.
maybe?
Do you lose any information?
Yeah, what's the context of the question?
Well, whenever my computer malfunctions, I lose everything.
Should be in the cloud.
Okay, well, maybe we'll follow it up later, because it sounds like it's perhaps a longer discussion, and we perhaps we'll come around and mend your computer. But,
Designed by
yeah, that's right, but yeah, okay.
Keep it practical.
That's right. No, but I think it's an interesting challenge, you know, when you think about things like power, we'll take certain services for granted, don't we? Yeah,
You need energy.
that's right. And they're not always there. Yeah. And you did talk about resilience at the beginning, didn't you? Yeah, that's right. So resiliency is absolutely, it was on the chart at the start, but it's not easy to achieve.
Bank of batteries.
Yeah, and we're not into solutions. And Mark also talked about resiliency when he was talking about HSMs. So, you know, that's,
Generally don't think about,
yeah,
if you think about
Yeah.
security, also think about resilience.
exactly. You can't, you're absolutely right. You can't ignore things like power. Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, I think, look, unless there's anyone else bursting to ask another question of Fatini, thank you so much. The opportunity after we break to come and talk to people. If you want to stay around, we've got some refreshments. But Connor, are you happy to come to do your presentation? Okay. I'm sure you'll be able to introduce yourself and explain.
will.
Yep.
So I'm the membership accreditation lead from CISEC. Those that don't know, CISEC are the Chartered Institute of Information Security. I've been doing this role for about four and a half years now. So and we're kind of changing things up now, introducing professional registration, which we might get into. So a little bit about CISEC before I do touch into accreditation and professional registration. We sort of represent over 35,000 professionals. That's through our sort of individual membership and our corporate membership as well. We work with lots of different academics. We have our different frameworks, which is our intellectual property. We have lots of different development pathways. So we sort of have something for everyone through each stage of the journey. And there are member types there that are shown on the slide. So affiliate up to sort of fellowship as well. I'll now get into professional registration. I'm quite important, I guess, because architecture and design is one that we are able to do alongside governance, risk management, and also audit and assurance. There are 4 specialisms that are currently live. So that's how professional registration is done at the moment. It's through specialism. The 3 we can do. So you've got governance, risk management, audit assurance, architecture and design. There's also security testing that's available as well, and the cyber scheme and Crest are the two licensing body for that. We've been a licensing body since back end of last year, so we're coming up to sort of roughly a year now that we've been doing professional registration. We've learned a lot through the process, and things are always going to keep changing, but it's been a good start. And professional registration is what has sort of replaced the old CCP scheme that went from role into specialisms, and professional registration has taken that place. So the 3 levels currently for professional registration, we've got associate, principal and chartership. So to give you a little bit of information of sort of what's required for each level. Associate, you're looking at sort of practitioner level. Principal, you kind of expected to be an expert, but just to know one specialism. And for charter, they'd expect you to also be an expert in that specialism, but to know a fair bit in other specialisms as well. But there is soon going to be coming a new level, which is the practitioner level. That's going to sit kind of where the associate level sits at the moment. So practitioner level, and associate's going to be brought down a bit. So it's going to be focused more with people with lesser experience, but still has the knowledge and understanding, but sort of the contextualized standard that is yet to be announced, is still ongoing. So how do you become professionally registered? Well, you have to provide competence, evidence against 18 competences in total. It's all done on evidence and the level of experience that you hold through your career. So it's broken down into different skill groups. So the A skills are your technical skills, then it goes through to B2E, which use softer skills as well. So the A skills are all based on the contextualized standard, and the softer skills are done on the SPCC. They can all be found on the council's website. Share the links to anyone that needs them afterwards. And the way you present your evidence is through situation, task, action, results, so the STAR format. For those that you aren't familiar, we do a very similar thing in SciSec, which I will get onto shortly. All levels, so you'd submit your application, all levels would get assessed through a paper assessment, and then there would be an interview required for all 3 levels. The associate interview roughly lasts about 45-ish minutes at the moment. Principal, you're looking at about an hour to an hour and 15. A charter can take up to 2 hours, so you do cover quite a lot of depth, especially at the higher level. So you have to be an accredited member of SciSec to apply at the moment. So for associate member of us, allows you to apply for associate and principal of the council, and you need to be a full member of SciSec to become a chartered professional. Once you are professionally registered, like many other sort of membership organisations, you do need to do CPD. I believe the requirement's 25 hours a year at the moment, but that should sit a lot in line with a lot of other things, like you have your CISP, for example. I think a lot of the CPD can be used for more than one. The cost at the moment, charter and principal applications are £700. This isn't an annual fee, it's just an application fee. Associate is £500. The ongoing fees would be your SciSec membership at whatever level you hold it, and there is a £99 annual fee that needs to go to the council. It would be paid directly to us, and then we pay on to them. But that's the register fee, so that's just to remain on their register annually. So just kind of touch a little bit now on the SciSec accreditation, because you obviously need to be SciSec accredited to apply through us. All our accreditations are based on our framework. We actually recently launched a new version last week, version 4, I believe it is now, and we break it down into different subsections too. It is available to all members. It's a free benefit to our members, but it is, you can see on the screen there, it's broken down into different sections. And in each section, I think we cover about 35 different skills in the more than happy to discuss that further with anyone if they want to find out a bit more. And we break it down in our skill levels 1 to 6. So 1 and 2 sort of knowledge and understanding. 3 and 4 is sort of practitioner level. Level 4, where we see our associate membership level sitting. And then level 5 and 6 are sort of your senior practitioner level. And level 5 is where full membership would sit within SciSec. So we're launching our process this week, actually, I believe now, in line sort of with the new skills framework. So similar sort of concept to the professional registration. It's all competency based, all based on your experience. And what you'd need to do is broken down now into mandatory, essential and technical skills. All mandatory skills would need to be completed. These are sort of your softer skills. The essential skills is broken down into a list of 5. It'll be shown on the screen on the next slide what those 5 are. You need to select 3 of those. And then the technical skills are chosen from you between sections A to I. So they're your more sort of technical skills. The J's and K's are your softer skills. And those can kind of, you can choose which ones you want to do to make sure you can kind of meet up to the score requirements there. So yeah, you need to score a minimum of level 4 in some of the skills for associates and a level 5 for full membership, which kind of ties in what I just mentioned. We see 4 practitioner level as associate, level 5 as senior practitioner level is where full membership would sit. Associate applications are only a paper-based assessment. Full membership applications do have an interview, which will last roughly about an hour. And then those applications sit before our accreditation committee, which is basically our moderation panel, and they sit monthly. So this is summarising kind of in a sort of an image what it looks like to apply for associate with the mandatory skills, essential, and then the specialism skills. The requirements. More than happy to share any further information with anyone that wants it sort of after this session, our guidance document. I didn't want to bore you with all that on the screen right now. And also this kind of touches on the full membership summary. So the score requirements are higher for full membership, obviously working at the higher level. That is kind of a nutshell what our accreditation looks like in the professional registration. I will be around the networking for anyone that wants to discuss anything. Thank you for your time. That's where you can contact us if anyone wants to discuss anything further offline. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Connor. I'm going to keep this fairly brief because we're going to have a break in a minute. The talk's gone on for quite a long time, but we do have a couple of questions. So first of all, there's a question about the relationship with Crest. Is there a link there?
Not specifically.
No, that's okay. So if the answer is no,
they can obviously do the security testing one, and we do our one.
Yeah. Okay. So doing similar kind of things, but in different. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, that's great. Is anyone else in the room while I'm just checking? Got a question for Connor? I did have one. I just wanted to sort of see if I could, because there was quite a lot to take in there, Connor.
Yes,
and
yes, I know.
From what I understand, you were saying you've got membership of the CISSG, yeah. And then in addition to, with different levels.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, CISSG working to help this additional layer of professional registration.
Yeah, that's right. So
those are 2 different things.
Yeah. So CISSG membership, the affiliate associate full fellow is for us. For the professional registration, we are a licensing body for the UK Cybersecurity Council.
Right. Okay. And so the question I had was, is this just for people working in public sector, or could it be useful for people doing in other?
Yeah, we've got a range of people from public and private that have gone through.
Yeah. Okay, David.
Just a point for Connor. Connor took me through it's quite painless. If you have a CISSP, they do accreditation of prior learning. I assume it's similar for the Royal Holloway MSc that other people have got. So thank you for that. It was painless. And then obviously I'm now on the path to do full on charter membership.
Okay, thank you. So that's great. Okay, so there are ways of making it less painful than it could be, which is great, because I mean I'm sure that's what you want to achieve.
Of course, it's as easy for everyone the better.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah.
So just to reiterate, the old NCSE CCP scheme has now been replaced by the UK. So
CCP was obviously, if you still have a CCP certification, it's still valid until its expiry date. But professional registration and chartering is what
the way it's the replacement.
This is a new thing.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. I think we'll call it a day at that. But thank you so much, Connor. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you.